We're rolling. We're on. Okay, here we go. Welcome. Anyone, everyone who's there. I'm Jared. I'm joined by Erica and our very special guest, Valerie, today. I will get to Valerie in just a moment to do a very warm intro on herself. But as always, hello, welcome. And it's always fun for us to know where everyone is, which is always interesting. So if you're there and in the comments, drop us a note. Where are you watching from? Where in the world? Are you local? We're here in New York. Are you around? Are you overseas? It's always fun to see where people are. Bonus points if you want to guess what Joanne is up to this week, our other co-host who's not with us. She's offline right now, but I can't remember where she said she was going to be. The Blue Ridge Parkway comes to mind. Personally, I don't know where that is or what that is. I believe that she's trying to have an offline week. So I'm going to guess maybe she's
Appalachia? Is it like the Blue Ridge Mountains or something?
That could be it. I mean,
Parkway sounds like a highway. It sounds like
it does. It's like the Palisades Parkway. Yeah, she's just camping out by the highway right now. And
she's definitely like in the woods somewhere.
Okay.
So sounds like my nightmare vacation PS, but I hope
she's boiling up a cup of tea maybe on a little portable stove, reading a book. All right. Well, hopefully it's good. But yeah, always fun for us to know where you're calling in from. Gosh, I'm watching someone.
I did that last week.
Anyway, Valerie, please tell us about yourself. Let's learn about your background and you.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
So I've spent my entire career in recruiting. I started out on the agency side. I was in retained search at Heidrick & Struggles. And then I went to the dark side, or, the other side, which is in corporate. And I spent most of my career in financial services. I worked for Lehman Brothers. I worked for Credit Suisse. I worked for an asset management company called Oppenheimer Funds for 6 years until they were acquired. And then I moved over. I had some experience with a company called Experian Marketing Services, which was kind of big data marketing. And then my last job was with Shutterstock. I was the head of talent acquisition at Shutterstock, which is kind of a tech media kind of company. And I led the talent acquisition function there. Right now, I'm between jobs, and so like a lot of people on this call, I can tell you from a candidate's perspective, as well as from a talent acquisition perspective. And don't be shy about asking questions, because I'm unfiltered. So this is a good place for me.
Title appropriate. I love that. Well, I mean, it's amazing to have you here and being able to share this stuff. We were just talking before we hit go live about peeling back the curtain on talent. And in your role as like a head of talent, most of the people that you're interfacing with, your immediate team are other recruiters in-house with you a lot of the time. But then you also spend the bulk of your time interfacing with your hiring managers, people who want to hire the roles. So you're the perfect person to speak to about what goes on in there.
First of all, I apologize to everybody. And I mean, this could be a whole other show, but like, I know that recruiters are not well loved to job searchers. Right. And what I'll start out saying is, trust me, it's not all our fault. We are kind of at the mercy of the hiring managers. Believe me, we want these jobs filled as much as you do. So what generally slows us down is on the other kind of complications.
Yeah.
Whether it's a hiring manager or comp, trying to figure out comp structure. There's all kinds of things that might do that.
One thing I've heard over the years, which I've always felt is kind of, it's music to my ears at times, is hearing from an internal talent recruiter at a company sometimes about their struggles with hiring managers, but then the lengths they maybe have to go to push back on those hiring managers at times to really say, hey, you need to give us feedback, or we need to get from you a more detailed brief, or we need some salary or something, but you have to push on that hiring manager because otherwise nothing happens. So even though you're there internal, it's your role to grow this company, you still need input to equal output.
No, absolutely. We're often working with hiring managers, and also just when they're so focused on certain experience, and so it's slowing the process. Like, we call it the purple squirrel in recruiting. Like what they're looking for is so rare that you're like, all right, I'm a recruiter. I've met some people that I know are worth your time. Sometimes you got to kind of lay down on the tracks and say, trust me, talk to these people and be open-minded about it, because a job could sit open for 6 months. You could have hired somebody 4 months ago that's up to speed now. So you have to be comfortable having those conversations.
To do that.
And I should say, all hiring managers aren't like that. Some are delightful, but we all have our tough ones.
What were you going to say? Sorry, Erica?
No, I honestly, I guess when the hiring manager is sort of, rejecting everyone so quickly, or I don't know if it's quickly, I'm assuming it is, like, can you tell like what exactly they are looking at? Is it like duration at a company? Is it the company itself, like the titles, whether they recognize it or not? Like,
do you mean like just without meeting them, like just rejecting resumes?
Yeah, like when they're rejecting any people that you're sending to them.
Okay, so again, like unfiltered, right? Sometimes it's that they've been too job hoppy, and that we could have a whole discussion about that because that's changed a lot. But there are people that really move around a lot, like multiple gaps in employment, they've been laid off like 3 or 4 times or whatever, like that sort of thing. They might question. They can be. It depends on the hiring manager. So, in financial services, I saw school snobbery a lot. I didn't see it as much in tech, but there are some school snobs. There are company snobs. Like at Shutterstock, there was more of that, where they kind of had aspirational companies that they thought were the bomb. And so like that could have been a reason that they didn't necessarily love the companies they came from. And then the other one, which is kind of the unfiltered part, is if you're too senior for the role, a lot of managers get very intimidated by that. And I mean, there's good, and like mostly it's not good. Ageism is real, and it's not great. But also, if you hire somebody that's overqualified for a job, chances are they're either going to get bored and leave, or like ask for a promotion very quickly. So there are some practical reasons why they wouldn't want that. Sometimes you want somebody that's a little more unformed so that you can kind of make them go your way. Things like that.
How do people who maybe want to take a step backwards in their career maybe get seen? Like if that's their goal, I think, another time we talked about people wanting to step away maybe from the leadership perspective and more to an IC role. Is there something that they can write on their application?
I think it's very hard to do. I mean, like during the Great Resignation, it was actually not that hard to do because we were all so desperate for talent that you would just take them, right? And then you'd have you'd at least have the conversation. But like in this kind of market, it's hard to convey. And I hate to say it because it's not the right answer, but the best way to do it is to have like a personal conversation, like maybe send an email, find somebody you're connected to, send it to somebody in HR or a recruiter and say, this is what I want to do. I don't want to like manage a team. I want to be an individual contributor. You have to have the conversation. And, I'd love to say, put it in your cover letter, but I'm not a cover letter person myself. I never read them. So I don't really put much stock in spending a lot of time on a cover letter. You guys can disagree with me on that, but I
don't agree.
I'm not into them either, but I totally hear your point, and I feel the similar challenge of like, you've got to be able to share your story a little bit more. There's something more there is a story, and that could be for all those points you touched on say gaps in the work, moving between roles. There's some sort of story there a lot of the time. And unfortunately, we're in such a fast-paced world. I think that if the receiver, that hiring manager, they've got their set of presumptions already.
Right.
That is too easy a presumption for them to land on, to too easily go, something doesn't feel or look right here. I don't even necessarily, it could be subconscious. It doesn't feel or look right next. Like it's almost automatic.
Yeah.
And so that if the person that's receiving that candidate, it's like, you've got to be able to tell your story more. There's some reason here. If you could share a bit more of that story, maybe, that person would see you in a different light.
Exactly.
But I just feel like that's what we're running into a lot of is there is this abundance feeling of candidates. Something doesn't feel right about someone. We'll err on the side of a no and move and look at the next.
Yes.
Rather than like, something doesn't feel right. But but maybe there's more to this story. Maybe I'll take another. It's like
right.
20 minutes trying to figure this out, or 20 minutes
right now. Yeah.
looking at the next 30 people that are in the queue. Like, so, yeah.
I kind of think that's a little easier if you're going through like an agency recruiter. Like, we're here to help tell that story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's harder, I guess, for someone applying directly themselves.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, even internally, building credibility with the hiring manager is really important. Like in the very beginning, you're not going to be able to say, trust me, and they're going to trust you, right?
Yeah.
But I will say, even from the agency perspective, like we worked a lot with Erica when I was at Shutterstock, and she was great. And so if she were like, trust me, I know that this resume looks like not great. This person is somebody that would be good. You know, I would trust that. So agency people can say that to somebody once they've built credibility.
Yeah. Yeah. What is I'm trying to think of like practical ways that an individual, a candidate, could help share some of that story and find some way to build that trust. I mean, we do have more tools at our disposal now. Of cover letters are dead.
Right.
We don't really care about them, but instead we have the resume itself to include elements of story. We have things like LinkedIn. Anyone could potentially build some sort of website or landing page for themselves. Obviously, we work a lot with designers, so they should be doing that anyway. But even slightly outside of that, it's not just about websites aren't just about some visual thing. It's also something to tell your story. Or I don't know. We have more tools now.
Yeah.
Can we?
Yeah.
I mean, I think even though I did say no cover letters, one way you can try is if you can get the email address, the work email address of. I mean, sometimes even if you send it to the CEO, they just lob it to the head of people who lobs it to and we usually will have at least a courtesy interview. Yeah. But so cover letters, not my thing, but a very brief but good email that explains a little bit, but like not a wall of words. Cause you know, you open an email, 3 paragraphs, you're like, nah, I'm not doing that. But like very brief, but like your real voice and just kind of explaining, that could get you there. So that's something to try.
I love that. I mean, we're hearing direct from a head of talent who's been in those shoes. If you were a candidate that was feeling like you're running into walls, feeling like if someone just spoke to me, I could sell more. Yeah. There's a pretty.
Now, trust me, like the CEO thing only works in a smaller company. Like, don't send to Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. It's going nowhere, okay? But like, you know, it's smaller organizations, like chief people officer, head of talent acquisition, that sort of thing, you might get an interview or, you know, a call.
Some sort of conversation. Yeah, that makes sense. I love that. I guess with some of this too, like, why don't you give us some real, like, straight up practical stuff on, you know, things like ATS and these sorts of systems, maybe more so recently at, say, Shutterstock when you were there.
Right.
A role goes live, it gets posted on the Shutterstock website, gets posted on LinkedIn, something like that. So you're going to have direct applicants. You've obviously got a direct line to someone like Erica or an experienced recruiter. That's coming in a slightly different way. But once you put stuff live, like, what is your team receiving then? How are they fielding things? What's happening from that?
Well, there are a lot of ATSs. And sadly, I've only worked with crap ATS.
Is there a good one? No, I'm just kidding.
I was one called Smart Recruiters, which was not bad actually. But then everything else, like I was on Workday, which is like the worst. Like any recruiter will say the worst, and applicants too. It's like awful, right?
It's not great.
I worked in Taleo. Like Taleo was so bad, and then Workday was like hold my drink. You know, it's worse. So whenever people talk about the ATS and like, oh, you know, I got blocked the ATS, I have not worked with an ATS that actually is that good. It's kind of like, some people will tell you like conspiracy theories. It's like you're giving way too much credit for people to be that smart to have a conspiracy, right? It's the same thing with ATS. I'm like, they're not that good. Now I say the caveat, I think that like the greenhouses and the Ashbys of the world actually maybe have a function that it will at least rank, right? And I think that probably most of what they're ranking is really key terms, like keywords matter for that. I don't think they're looking at like, oh, they worked at this place or they worked at that place, you know? So when people think it's the ATS, it's probably not the ATS. It's probably either like in this market, they got too many applicants. So, you know, as soon as they got a pipeline, they shut it down.
Stop looking.
So it could be that. It could be like these are the ways that I could knock out people without like even really looking. One is the knockout question, which is usually visa sponsorship. If you know you're not going to sponsor that role, forget it, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's awful, but I mean, there are roles where you could not possibly even get
an actual.
So
yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's one way. But another thing is, and a lot of people don't realize this, even with remote and hybrid, a lot of times I can knock out states. Like,
Okay.
and that's usually like something you can look at without opening the resume, because except for like very big companies, most companies don't have entities in every state,
Right.
which means they can't hire in every state. Like the last place I worked, there was like, I think 24, 25 states that we could have working in. So a lot of times you get knocked out for things like that, and people don't realize that's a very quick thing that might happen.
Yeah. It's challenging too, because we sometimes see from designers, I would relocate. Again, it's that story of like, but we don't know that. No one, you don't know that. And
also it's more of a pain in the butt to hire somebody that has to relocate. You do that for jobs where you cannot fill it otherwise, right?
Sure.
And also like, especially when it's to New York, I'm like, people do not know how harrowing it is. Then they're like, I was trying to find a 2-bedroom with a washer and dryer, and it was impossible. And I'm like, yeah, you had no idea.
Welcome to New York City. Yeah, tell me about it. I've been there. I moved across the world. I was like,
what the hell?
What? They didn't tell me this is the brochure. Thanks, salt. Nah, still worked out.
Yeah.
How do you decide? No, I was just going to say, like, for the state thing, is that a question that is in the like application that you guys ask, or is it just
not usually, because it would be kind of long, like like small print, like it has to be in these states. It's not usually listed as something that you talk about. It's just that there are certain places that you can. Usually when we would list remote, it was we chose states where we knew we could hire out of to post. So that's the best really.
Adding to the job description.
Yeah.
It's there you go. So it's I suppose in this fast-paced, high volume, your teams at times are just like, they've got to sometimes find reasons to get to the core of who they're looking for,
right?
And to get to that core, sometimes that is process of elimination of the noise. That's kind of getting in the way. It's like, we can't sponsor, that's noise that we just have to push to the side. I really feel like these tricks of the ATS are just, you're placing your mental energy in the wrong place. Something else is not translating about your story.
Right, exactly.
Is not, unfortunately, it's some human with a bias against what you've said.
I once wrote a LinkedIn post a long time ago that was about like what's behind the curtain. And I'm like, I look at unless it's a job, like I used to do like finance, very junior jobs, and you get so many applicants, you just couldn't. But I look at every resume. Now I might look at every resume for like not even 30 seconds, right? Let's be honest. And what I'll tell applicants is like, let's say 100 people apply for a job. I'm making up these numbers, but about 30 of them are so like totally not qualified. You're like, what do you just sit there and apply for jobs all the time? You just wasted
sometimes.
And then there's probably another, 30 where it's like, you kind of did it, but not really, it's close, but I get why you applied, but not really. And then the remaining ones, like about 40 of them are probably people that are viable, right? And you're not going to talk to 40 people.
Right.
So you have to start really sharpening up which ones look like they might work. And sometimes that is about like where you worked, like, how long you were there, like your career progression, things along those lines. That's when that starts mattering. But we look at them all. I mean, the one thing I will say from a resume writing perspective, imagine us recruiters, we look at resumes all the time. It's like mind numbing, right? Mm-hmm. Do not make it a wall of words, because I don't know about you guys, but like when people have these like big paragraphs, and especially that top part, I get it, you're putting the keywords in there, but it's just like, it's noise. And the easier it is on the eyes, the more likely I'm going to spend time looking at it. And I don't know if you guys disagree with that, but I do think that a good resume matters.
Yeah. How do you feel about like a skills section on the side? Like just sort of like, listing out?
I don't have a beef with any of that. And again, I understand that we're all trying to play the game, like, so people know, but do I look at it? Like, not really. Do you? I mean, do you guys? I mean, like, maybe if it's a very specific skill, like, or let's say it's a software, like they've used that software that I know I need. Notion. Okay, you got it. Okay, whatever. Maybe that, but like otherwise, I don't like leadership, DEI, whatever. It's like, I'm not going to look at that. That's you tooting your own horn, which is great. You're doing that, but is a recruiter going to look at it? They want to see more what you've done.
Yeah. I've learned to, or I continue to try to separate my personal taste on a resume versus knowing that in the industry and in design in particular, there is no standard, there is no set way, there is no gospel of this is how it must be done.
Right.
So I try to come in with the lens of like, I just want to try and find the information for me to know whether this person's right. I don't want to judge and say, oh, I don't like this section or that section, because that's just my personal taste. I know what I like. I also know what has worked many times, but I know that for all the companies I hire for, they're all different. Yeah. They all have their personal taste too. So it's hard, I think, to weigh in on and say, have a skills section, don't have a skill, because someone might like it and someone might not.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you're selling yourself at the end of the day. And I agree. And I should put the caveat that like design in particular or some specific creative marketing, that I agree. Like it's all over the place in terms of what the resumes look like. It's part of what it is, right? So that's the rules are very much more lax there, I think. But I just, what I meant by the skills thing, and it's funny because I actually like skills-based hiring, but I think that like people just list what you think you want to see, right? Mostly, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
It's kind of a funny, I know you could almost, it's almost interesting when you see someone ranking themselves too, 9 out of 10 of this, or on one hand you sort of go, okay, but then you're like, okay, whose scale was it's hard. I know people are just trying to give you a
what I
signal
would
of
tell
who they
you,
are.
what I would say about that ranking is you don't want to like give yourself like accolades like that. However, you can list accomplishments that show it. And an example is like, I think that I have strong leadership skills. And one of the accomplishments I showed on Shutterstock was that I got 100% approval on the employee pulse survey from my team, which nobody else got. So like that was a good thing to put because it's like I lead.
You show it through the results.
Actual accomplishment that really happened, like a metric like that, do it for whatever. But just saying you're awesome.
I'll be the judge of that. Thanks. Yeah. That's too true. That's great. I think I want to bring this. I'll surface this. It's a bit of a longer comment. Oh, it's covered up half our faces.
There we go.
But I'll summarize for you really quick. I feel like this comment was more around, going after established in-house roles versus agency roles, and how they're able to get a look in very quickly at agencies, but seem to struggle a little bit to get a role at an in-house company. It feels like a higher barrier. I think with some of this, my quick thought on that is more just around, it goes back to what you were just saying, Valerie, of like, if there are 100 applicants and then you get that even down to 40, and of those 40, who are going to be the top 10 that you're going to call? Because they're probably the only ones that are going to get a call. So I think, unfortunately, sometimes in this case, you could be in the top 20. You could be in the top 15 maybe, but it's the top 10 that are maybe getting in there first. And that's just, I think that's just the reality of some of the numbers. And are you a better applicant or candidate than the top 10? Possibly. Is it showing on paper to the person receiving it? Not quite. Because they have felt that 10 other people maybe were more aligned based on their experience, based on the companies they worked at. That's why. Yeah.
And I actually don't know what the nuance would be between why in-house is so much harder than agency. I don't know if agency's kind of looking for a different kind of set of experience. They probably are. There's probably some nuance there that I'm not aware of that they might be.
At least for design, it's usually, I think that maybe in agencies, people have more variety, right? So they're not necessarily staying with one product for a long term, kind of starting from the beginning and ending it. I do know many companies though that use that as an advantage though, because that means that you're able to be a part of so many different processes for different clients, work really quickly, like have different industry knowledge, like depending. So I'm a big fan of like hoping that these companies will wake up, honestly, like wake the F up really, and start using the people that are, they can do it. I mean, everyone design.
Yeah, actually, and you bring up something, for some reason, I didn't think of the equivalent of that, which would be for recruiting. Like, you know, sometimes you've only done agency work and then you want to go in-house. It is kind of hard to go over. And you're right. Part of that is that to an in-house place, they think everything you do is transactional. It's not about building. And they also, I remember when I was going in-house, one of the things that was told to me was, there's never going to be a search where you say, I don't want to work on that one. You know, like, you know, we used to call some really crappy searches a bone. It's like, they just threw me a bone. You know, they said 20 people, I'm not going to spend time on that. There's never a search there. And so they think that like an agency person might struggle with that. So I think maybe it's similar. It's just like, they think that you're going to be bored or you're going to, you know, whatever, that you don't want to kind of dig your heels in and do the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
So that would be part of it.
It's
not right, by the way. I don't agree with it, but I mean, that's just what we're thinking.
I hear you. Well, I see here also another comment. I think it was more so in response to the first one about recognizing talent. And it makes me just sort of think of another question for yourself, Valerie, is like, you have these teams of recruiters, especially at Shutterstock. Each of those recruiters in your teams, they have a different background and maybe a different expertise when it comes to the skill sets that they're hiring. What efforts are put in from yourself, from the team, from the company around helping your recruiters recognize talent? Like, of course they recognize talent, but let's break down that wall. Like, how do you do that? What are you doing to be aware of what good talent is and looks like?
Well, it's been a while since I had somebody very entry level where I really had to handhold a lot. You know, usually I have, like, let's say they at least have like 3 or 4 years of experience.
But even at that level, they're probably, there's going to be some things that might come through from the company that are outside of their expertise too. Like, you're still driving like talent recognition.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I look for when I hire people more than anything, is that they love to recruit. Like, they love what we do, right? Because I don't think that this job is one you take if you are like a transactional person or you're just like, whatever, you know, you got to really have that. We're story people, right? And so it's about really being curious about people and kind of understanding, like, you know, that it's not just what's on the resume, but it's the personality. And is that going to work? Are their values aligned? I mean, I know it sounds kind of BS-y, but it's true. Like, good recruiters kind of know if this is going to be a vibe, like this is going to, you know. And so a lot of that is really just about connection. And so that's one of the reasons, like, when I interview people, now I'm like, I'm a first pass, so I don't have to kind of really drill down, but I don't do a lot of the behavioral stuff. I'm like, let's have a conversation. I remember when somebody wrote to me about it afterwards, and she's like, it was such a nice, I felt like we were having a conversation, because that's how they reveal themselves. That's how you kind of get to know the person, and you can kind of see, is this person going to be, and you also obviously can tell if they put their money where the mouth is. Are they smarter with the experience that you need? You know, how are they going to show up in an interview with the hiring manager? Things like that. But I think that, so I guess I didn't quite answer your question, Jared, but I think that one of the things I teach my teams is to really, like, sometimes if they're very junior, let's look at the resumes together. I'll tell you why that's not good. I'll tell you why that's good, things like that. But it's about when you have the conversations, like, what's happening. And then, like, you get feedback from hiring managers, like, I'm not getting any good candidates. And then you can kind of drill down with the recruiter and say, you know, why?
Yeah.
What are you bringing forward? What's, you know, what's the problem? And then you just work at it from there.
Yeah. Has there, just off the back of that, has there been a story, you know, at some time throughout your experience of, like, you mentioned like transactional and this assumption that, which can feel like that in recruitment sometimes, you just keep sending and you just people just keep rejecting. It feels very transactional. And you've got a hiring manager that is treating you and the talent team a little bit transactional. They're just knocking people back, and you're saying, these are great people. I've heard their stories. There's more to this person. Like, is there room at times, and it probably comes back to trust, I guess, but you've had to go back and push back on that person that's maybe treating talent a little bit transactional saying,
Absolutely.
hey, we're building a company of great people. These are great people. Like,
yeah,
what does that look like? What happens?
And that's actually something that I train people on my team is like,
Right.
as a recruiter, you should have a perspective, meaning like some, especially on the junior side, there are some recruiters that are just like, they'll look at the resumes, they'll screen for comp, whatever. They'll hand it to the manager and they won't be like, this is a strong one, or I know this is this, but you should really look at this or whatever. And you should have a perspective. That's the value we bring, right? Like, I think that, like, you want me to rank? You want me to force rank? If I gave you 3 great candidates, this is what I think. So I definitely have pushed back. If managers are totally being unreasonable and aren't talking to anybody, I mean, one thing I'll tell you honestly, I mean, if it's really bad, like, let's say I'm working on 10 searches. If this person's like, you know, taking a long time to get back to me, rejecting everybody, I'm like, you're not serious about hiring. I'm going to prioritize the other searches, you know? So that's one of the ways you do it, honestly, you know? And then once they're like, I need this person, you're like, okay, let's talk about what you really need. So yeah, you have to have those conversations.
I love it.
Do the hiring managers create the questions that you maybe ask people? Like, do they have any part in this sort of?
Sometimes. It's a good question. Sometimes they do. If it's very specific work and it's like kind of, yes, they need this absolutely or no, you know, then they'll ask this, they make sure they have this and ask that question. And I think in design, they do that a lot. Yeah. There's certain things they're looking for.
We're really on the screen. Yeah.
But mainly, no. Mainly, like when you're talking to a recruiter, at least, I can give you the recruiter's perspective. Some recruiters love behavioral questions. And that's just like, you know, how are you a team player? You know, are you whatever they are, you know? So they might ask those questions. Really what we're screening for is that what you have on your resume is legit, that you can talk intelligently, that you present well, things along those lines, and compensation. We want to know your comp expectations, because if you're way out of whack, you know, we don't waste our time. So that's probably the big things we screen for.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, those things need to align before it gets much further. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I see a question here as well. I'll bring this up. It's a little bit design specific, but I think, Valerie, you will have an opinion on this. It's going to cover us up a bit too. It's talking about a non-traditional background, example, not coming from, for example, a design degree or a design skill. It sounds like Colin's maybe saying being a bit more self-taught,
right,
and getting into design. And how to maybe approach and navigate getting into a company or a role when maybe that's feeling like a barrier, that you don't have that particular formal qualification, which take out design and, you know, I'm sure you've worked.
Well, I think, I would have to kind of take out design. Well, here's what I'd say. Yeah. If you're entry level, it's very hard. And I would say you're going to need to, like with design, I guess, you know, really push your portfolio to show the work you've done. If you're not entry level and you've had some really cool jobs and good things, that shouldn't matter as much. And you should put your education or, you know, lack of education, just that should be, after you've had a few years of experience, it should go on the bottom of your resume anyway. Right. So it shouldn't be priority. But coming right out of school, it's going to be hard. You need to find a way to show them your work. Yeah. And they are going to be looking. I mean, and I can't really blame, especially with something like design, why, you know, people would be like, okay, this person's went to this school, so I know they're going to be well-rounded in this way. So it's hard. I mean, that's almost like you need to get in like through a referral or something along those lines is probably the way you kind of start.
I think we're starting to see, though, like a shift in the requirements for any like design school degrees or 4-year colleges or 2-year whatever. I think that like is really falling off of job descriptions now that I've been noticing.
Yeah, as well it should be, by the way, because I keep saying there's diminishing returns to a bachelor degree now. I mean, you come out with $100,000 in debt and you like get a $50,000 a year job if you're lucky. It's insane, right?
It's not adding up anymore.
Yeah.
In your experience, was that say mid-level and beyond? So the role already, you're looking for at least a few years commercial experience.
Right.
Again, remove design. Did you find, you know, in the last few roles that you worked on or, you know, that you were in, was school less important to the hiring managers you were hiring for? Was it not really coming up?
Like at Shutterstock, I don't remember it being a focus
at all.
There was like one person that cared. Nobody else did. But I remember in financial services, first of all, school snobs, but also I had a few, now this was like 5 years ago, so things might have changed, but like I had a few instances where like we were ready to make an offer to somebody and it was like a sales role or something where you really didn't need it. And like we'd go to verify that they'd gotten the bachelor's degree and they were like 5 credits off or something like that. And we wouldn't hire them like that, like that, like, so there are places where it still matters. But as Erica said, I think it's becoming less and less of an issue.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen that. And as you get a bit further in the career, you think what gets looked at first is your experience, your background, the companies you've worked at, the accomplishments that you've had. That's probably ranking much higher than going all the way down and thinking, oh, where'd you go to school? Like, you've been in the game for 10 years. Where you went to, I don't know.
I totally agree.
I've struggled a bit with it because I don't really know the schools here very well. I went to school on the other side of the planet, and even then.
I love that. I love, because I think school snobbery is like such BS. It drives me bananas, right? And like I know we had an office in Dublin, and like there was a college called Trinity, which I guess was a big deal. Like Trinity, and I'm like, you know what? You could be saying that could be a community college, as far as I know. And I love that. It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't have the same brand recognition. Yeah, someone could tell me these. Oh, I went to this school, and I'd say, I don't know what that is, but
anybody that brags about the school they went to, just stop. You're having a drink. Move along. You don't want to talk to them.
All right. There's a resume tip too. Maybe don't put that front and center. Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm loving getting all these insights on peeling back the curtain. I really think when people feel like they're automatically rejected from something, it's not quite the unless maybe they could be falling into that sponsorship category or something that might trigger that. Otherwise, this auto rejections are not really a thing. Someone still looks at your work, and then that talent person, then decides like this person isn't quite a fit. We're going to pass.
Exactly. And Jared, you brought this up, and this is very true in this market, which is a tough market, that if it could just be that they didn't look at your resume because they had too many people in the pipeline already.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind. So, I know I take it personally too, but usually when you apply to a job, you automatically get something acknowledging that you've applied. Okay. I don't think I've ever gotten like an automatic reject, and I've never worked somewhere where we give automatic rejections like that. So
there you go. So,
Can you, and then just like quickly, because I know a lot of people will get like a random rejection maybe like 5 months later. Is that usually because they're going through the rest of the pipeline, they still haven't hired, or they're just closing the job?
They're closing the job. So that's kind of lazy recruiting, to tell you the truth. Like I always tried to, I'm kind of like one of those, what is it, like zero inbox. I don't like have anything open, right? So when I'm going through resumes, I just like dispose of them. Like if it's not working, I'll reject right away, because I'd rather have everything. But there are some people that just leave everything like, like as if they hadn't looked at it, though they had. And then so that means they have to clean it up when the job's finally filled. And that's why, and that tells you that it took them 5 months to fill that job. So it was a doozy.
Well, on that, Simone has a question. Again, this is a little bit design specific, so Erica and I can add to that part. But in general, it's about a hiring process altogether, a standard format for interviewing. But I think off the back of this, for yourself, Valerie, like how much does speed, process, efficiency, like that time to hire, how much does that matter to your talent teams you've looked after, and then in turn the hiring managers you're doing it for? Is it really important that you have to run an efficient hiring process?
Well, it's one of every like recruiting team's KPIs. Like time to fill matters. I don't prioritize it as much. It matters a lot to me in volume hires. Like if you're doing kind of like easy ones that you do a lot of, you better be able to do those fast. Because if you're not, then you're just doing something inefficiently, right? But like if you're working on complicated searches or senior level searches, it could take longer. And so that's why I don't put as much emphasis on time to fill. But it certainly matters. I mean, like if you think that you need to fill a job, and so, and if you think we're adding value by putting a butt in that seat, you want to do it as quickly as possible. So in that way, it matters. In terms of Simone's question, you guys might be better suited to answer the, I mean, what I can tell you about the design interviewing in-house is usually the recruiter will just forward the portfolio. Like they'll look at the resume, and if the
Yeah.
resume looks like the right experience, they will forward the resume and the portfolio to the hiring manager, who will then assess the portfolio. I mean, really good hiring managers might kind of train a recruiter and be like, well, see what this portfolio didn't have, or this is what we're looking for, things like that. But generally speaking, it's going to be the hiring manager that's assessing the portfolio to see if, you should be interviewed.
Yeah. Yep. I think standard interviewing stages for a designer, again, there is no standard. It's pretty broad. We see everything from portfolio presentation rounds where you walk through your work. We see the whiteboarding tasks sometimes for a more UX style role where they want to interact with you and work through a problem together. The design tests, I still feel they would be less common, but they still exist. They are another whole kettle of barrel.
I don't even know how you do that. Like, what do you do?
It's not great.
I don't know.
You waste people's time and Sorry, Erica.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I feel like in 2021, when everything was so crazy, that whiteboarding was a little bit more common than making people do design tasks, right? Because they were probably interviewing at so many places. And then I feel like now I haven't seen too many whiteboard challenges or sort of tasks. I would say it's a little bit more design tasks sometimes, or neither, and just conversation, because that's how it should be.
Yeah, it really depends on the company and their experience and their hiring expertise. I think with things like that. Real quick on that last point there, which can be kind of expanded out to any tips for someone moving to the US and does not require sponsorship. You got to tell that story, right? You got to fill in.
Yeah, you just have to put it. I would put it at the very top, like green card, or very clear that you do not need sponsorship, because a lot of people, believe it or not, because they know it's a knockout question for question, they'll say that they don't need sponsorship, but they're like, oh, actually, in 3 years my H-1B expires. It's like, okay, then you need sponsorship. So it's better to just say that you have the green card or whatever it is you have. I mean, the other thing I would say, Simone, is this is kind of like a little sneaky, but like, let's say you're moving to New York. You might just want to put New York on the resume, because I'm assuming you don't want them to relocate you, because most people aren't going to want to invest in that either. And again, it's just like, it's this market, right? I'm sorry, but that's just the reality of it. So you need to seem like the right candidate that's a very easy fill. Right. So you need to take those barriers away. So, if I'm moving to New York, I'd love to have a job before I get there. Just put New York as your, on your resume. You don't have to put your address. So I would say
this all comes back to that 100 applicants, 30 not being great, 30 being maybe. The minute you start to add some barriers to the possible hiring of you, it makes someone think twice, and they go, we got these 40 others that don't have that. Caveat, that requirement.
They can start in 2 weeks. They can, whatever. They can.
We go on the path of least resistance every time. And it doesn't always mean it's the best person for the job, but it is the more obvious place to start. And once you start there, you might not have to go back out to the other 30 you kind of put in the other pile.
Exactly.
What's your controversial opinion? And I know it doesn't apply everywhere, but many ATS systems will ask a question like, do you require sponsorship now or in the future? And I know some people will feel you're like, oh, it's a bit gray. I'm not sure, well, like, for example, I have an E3 visa, which is a work visa, which is so far different to a H-1B. And so it's kind of, for me, it might be like, I do need sponsorship, but I don't know if I want to be put in the H-1B requirement category, because it's a very different visa with such different requirements that it's very anyway, you get that question on an application.
Well, that's interesting. I think that the truth is, you should say you do require a sponsorship, right? And then you can put like what visa you're on your resume, because like people generally know, like, also Canada has a one, and there are a few that are easier. I mean, the biggest issue is that H-1Bs are not easy. You have like a 1 in 3 chance of actually getting it. It's like a lotto, and then and plus there's the cost of getting it and all those things. Then forget about it. Green cards are super hard and they're super expensive. So that's why people are why companies are reluctant to do it unless they absolutely have to. I'm trying to remember, like with an E3, is it like automatic that you? I mean, I still think
it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it just doesn't. There's not really a 1 in 3 chance. It's
you get it. If you get it,
visa,
you get it.
Yeah, we never hit the quota. It's for Australians only, so not a lot of US people always know about. But I would put it almost in as simple as a TN visa, right? Which is very straightforward. It's pretty straight. It's a very different visa category to say the H1B, but if you're an applicant, you're applying, that question comes up, you do technically need it. But if you click, yes, I need visa sponsorship, I get automatically rejected. And now I'm worried. And so I know people think, oh, I'll say that I don't, so I get looked at. But then I know for talent, maybe you get frustrated, like, hey.
I won't lie. It's a little frustrating. Because then you can fall in love with somebody. You're like, oh, they're not going to do it. Because the thing is not just the expense of it, but like even with an easy visa, it's usually time that you have to put into, like, it'll transfer in 6 weeks or whatever. And so these things just make it more complicated. Like that's, again, another example of where you need to get referred in. Like somebody say, okay, this guy Jared is good. Just talk to him. It's an easy visa. It's not an H1B. But I think if you're answering that question, you do need sponsorship.
I'm honestly surprised that like these questions on the applications don't say list what type of visa you have, or
that'd be interesting.
Like explain there like how it works. And obviously, like whenever I speak to people, I'm like, do you know what this means? Like obviously, can you cover your lawyer fees? Can you cover your costs? Like if you can do that, that's helpful, at least when we tell your story. But I spoke to someone last week who is in Boston, graduated, already has 5 years of experience back at home, is on an F1 visa, which is, different. Also.
2 years.
But has 3 years of experience, 3 years until needing a visa and a sponsorship. And I feel like tenure, honestly, right now in design is not like long-term. So I kind of feel like you can hire somebody for a year, 2 years, they can get that experience and then like set them on the way. I just think for that person, they don't have to do anything. Like they are start working tomorrow.
I totally see your point, but again, it comes down to, but can I hire somebody with exact same experience where I never have to worry about that?
The other, an alternative option that doesn't come with that. Yeah, I know. It's always like, oh, but it's only 3 years. And if we were to break down stats, how many people actually stay 3 years?
I know.
Probably not many, but just even the mention that there could be an end date to this candidate, you're like, no. It's so hard, isn't it?
And I hate that. Like I'm a global person. I'm like down with that. But it is what it is, right? We have to live within these parameters. So it's very hard for people that need sponsorship unless you're like STEM. And I'm sorry for that. It sucks.
And do you think, just on that again, to some of your experience with like, if you wanted to sponsor someone, for example, the H1B or something, there's quite a few layers and levels to go through at the company to approve it, to pay for it, all these things. And now you're met with like these two people, and this person comes with all this, and this person doesn't.
It's easy, and especially the H1B because there's no guarantee. So it's a risk. There's a lot of risk there.
Yep. All right. Storytelling, finding the right audience. I think my other point on that is helpful is like finding a company where maybe there are others on that visa.
Yeah, that's true.
Equal. Is there a list of companies that sponsor like anywhere in the world?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, as I said, there are certain roles that are very hard to get sponsored. Like if H1B is what you need, it's just very hard to get granted for you. And so like, for some reason, when I was doing like financial analyst roles, there were a lot of like grads that like, just graduated that were from like other countries, a lot of China, a lot. And you're like, I'm not going to like, first of all, there are so many people applying for this that I don't need somebody that needs sponsorship, but like, I don't know that I could even get it if I wanted to.
I don't know if any work visa comes with requirements of the US wants to basically prove or have proof that that the company can't hire someone already in
Right.
the US. That's the
Exactly.
whole premise of a work visa is we
Exactly.
tried to hire a citizen of our nation.
Yeah.
We couldn't. So here's a
Okay.
case why we would like to hire someone from it.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is to employ those within the country already. So you keep that in mind. It's like, okay, I get it. So that you got to make these cases. Anyway, so yeah, that is one little tip. Look for companies. I would look for companies that have Australians there.
Yeah.
You know, if they went to university in Australia or like they worked in Australia, that might be a signal. Hey, maybe they're there on an E3 visa too. Therefore, the company already has familiarity with it. Same with Canadians, or I think Mexico has access to the TN as well. Be a detective. Look for those signals.
That's smart.
Yeah. What are some other tips that you give? Like, okay, so someone wants to reach out to you, right? They're looking for work. They've applied to a job at the company that, you know, the talent team's there. They've done the application, but they think, okay, I want to reach out to, I want to back this up.
Right.
What are some ways that they might better like get their story, get themselves heard? They could maybe reach out. We're seeing a lot of that.
Right. Well, I will say that if people, I mean, the heads of TA are going to get mad when I say this, but if people reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they say, I just applied for this job, like usually it's not a job I'm working on, like, you know, so I mean, sometimes it is, and that's fine. But if it's not, I lob it to the recruiter that's working on it. I do not give the recruiter's name because I don't want people. That's like a recruiter code.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not going to have that person. So I never give the name, but I'm like, I will pass it along. I don't recommend. I just like forward it and say, do what you will with it. So at least you've kind of, and I think most heads of TA, I mean, there might be some that are just not doing that, but I think most would just lob it to the person that's working on the search, right?
Yeah.
And so does that mean you're going to get a call? Not necessarily, but maybe at least like you've kind of nudged up a little bit. If you can figure out who the recruiter is, do that, you know, and again, that I'm not promising you that'll work. But it'll give you a little bit more of a chance.
Do people get really mad, or, you know, if you email, let's say, the hiring manager, like directly or around somebody, like, do they lob it to you, or like?
They usually get lobbed to us. Like, and I will tell this, like, agency side, unless you have a relationship with a hiring manager, I wouldn't recommend you do that because TA gets mad about that. Like sometimes it's control, like it's just like some people are gatekeepers, right? Which is annoying. For me, it was always like, I don't want to pay a fee for that one. I can actually find somebody. So please don't do that, you know? So I would say always go through TA, like honestly. But if you have a relationship, like, you know, you have a relationship with the head of design or something, and you've already done a placement, then you can go ahead and do that. You know, that's fine because that's your relationship. It's not, but if you don't have a relationship, it's probably not the best thing to do.
What do you think if a candidate or an applicant were to reach out to you for a role that you're working on? We see a lot of generic messages out there. I think LinkedIn has even built it in for you. Hello, I just applied for that role. Please, you know, okay, thanks. But if they were to go an extra step and just to ensure that they're seeing, like, what little things might they, rather than sending you just a generic message, would there be certain things you'd want to receive from someone that would help them be in maybe a better standing? Should they highlight something to you? What could help with that?
Like I like them to be as personal and authentic as possible. And I said that Eric and I had a little conversation about how much we love ChatGPT. The LinkedIn AI is not good, so do not use that to
avoid.
But like ChatGPT actually. But I think that you, again, short. Do not start with, I hope this message finds you well. Okay, just don't. And just like kind of get to the point and say, I'm really excited about this because I love Shutterstock, or I love, like, something that makes you, why this role is one where you really want to have that conversation. That's kind of what you want to do.
Yeah, I love that. I think it matters. I think in this sea of noise right now, it can be about standing out. And if we're so worried about, are we even being seen, then the next peg is like, well, if I got seen, my work was seen and ultimately it didn't line up, okay, sure, I'd like to get spoken to. But when you feel like you don't even know if you're being seen yet, maybe that outreach and just ensuring, like, you know what, I got this person's attention. I got seen. I wasn't right, but at least I was seen. I think people want that. So,
although it kind of becomes more personal when you've been seen.
And you still got knocked back? Oh, true.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, those people, they just wipe me
Just
out.
talk
They
to
have
me.
no idea how fabulous I am. And then they meet you and they're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of it's fun. None of this job search stuff is fun. Trust me, I know. And I think that that's something I always understood on the other side too, was that it's like, that's why I don't really like recruiters that are super tough interviewers. Cause it's like, you know, you've been on the other side of that table, like, you know what it's like, you know, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Can I ask a question about the interviewing? So like when you guys start an interview process, do you do like batch interviews, like, and then kind of like stop people from moving forward and get through the first one first? Just because I feel like there's roles that are open for a really long time. And I think another question I really want to quickly add in is, what is an evergreen job and why do they exist? Because everyone knows about them and they suck. But how does the interviewing go? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. It varies, but normally I would say we do not do the batch thing. What can be annoying is like if a hiring manager is like, we meet somebody, we like them, we give it to the hiring manager likes them, and then they say, I'd like to have 2 or 3 more before we move them to the next batch. And I'm like, you could lose that person.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be sitting there. I mean, we try to keep them warm and everything, but it's like, keep going through the process. Like, so there are hiring managers that say like they want to see a few more, but we rarely do okay, we got to give them 5 people to talk to. Now we stop. And then you kind of just keep, and what most recruiters do is if you have a good pipeline of candidates, and a good pipeline could just be like 3 viable candidates that are in the conversation, I usually stop, because you don't want the hiring manager thinking there's just like a line, a queue of fabulous candidates, because then they get like, it's like Tinder all of a sudden. They're like, oh my God, there's so much to choose from. This is fabulous. So most good recruiters will stop for a while. And then if those don't pan out, you kind of build the pipeline again.
Okay. And then can you talk about those evergreen.
Never.
Never heard that before.
So essentially these are jobs that you hire for often. You know, either people get promoted out of them. A lot of times they're like sales, entry-level sales and things along those lines. So they have them posted. I mean, I know they're annoying, but the point is like that job gets filled a lot. So it's better to have like a stable of great candidates that you can kind of choose from. So when one opens, you can fill it quickly. So yeah, they're not ideal, but if somebody does it, it's usually not nefarious. It's like, I know I'm going to have to fill this shortly, so why don't we just keep talking to people? That's the essence of it.
Okay.
We don't see too much of it in design, I think. Every now and then you see the agencies will kind of call, as in a design agency or similar, will say, hey, open call for freelancers. You know, they're sort of maybe building up their book again of just knowing who's out there. But it's not too many companies that have a evergreen product designer role. I don't know.
No, not necessarily, but I just think that there's some roles that have been open for like a very, very long time. And obviously the design community talks, like it's small, big.
Sometimes that's just really an inefficient hiring process where the hiring manager is like not moving on it. And like one of the practices I loved when I was like at Credit Suisse at some investment banks was like, if a job was open for 6 months, it was evaluated. Now, if there were reasons like, oh, well, we made an offer and they declined and all kinds of things, that's different. But if it's open and they're not making a decision, that headcount was taken away from hiring managers. And I love that, because it's like, you obviously don't want to fill this job. And like, you really needed this spot, you would have filled it by now. So, but a lot of places don't. And so when you see things that are posted forever, it's because they're just sitting on it. Maybe it could even be like they are not sure if they're going to get that head count. They thought they were, but they're not sure they're going to get the funding. They should pull the job at that point, but they don't necessarily do that. It's sloppy.
It's sloppy.
Yeah. I love, I can see the commitment to the organization and things like that. Was that something that you try to instill in your recruiters in the team? Like, let's be organized, you know?
Oh, okay. I thought you meant to the corporation. Yes. I mean, we try. I'm not that organized, to tell you the truth. So
Zero is pretty good.
One of the things that I try to push is a positive candidate experience and like disposition of people, that cleaning up. Keep your searches tidy in the ATS. And make sure that you're communicating with your candidates. Those are the things that matter a lot to me. And obviously giving hiring manager feedback, like being communicative with that hiring manager.
I love that. Great candidate experience, I think, it's a tough one to uphold at
I know,
times.
for all
In
of us,
these
for all of us, yes.
busy times, it's, you know, people are getting swamped. It's sort of happening, but and hopefully maybe you could answer this. Like, I sometimes joke that there's no KPIs for being nice, and that
Oh,
companies
I wish there was. Oh,
exactly, but it takes people like yourself, people like me, like Erica, any opportunity we have to instill that quality in a fellow recruiter or someone that's responsible in that candidate experience, we have to instill that skill in them, and because that's our value, that's our integrity for what we
yes.
do. We're not metriced on it. No one's looking to see whether we've done it or not, but it's about being a great human. If we can
Yeah.
share and instill that integrity in others,
Yeah.
then that hopefully makes recruitment a better place to be, which ultimately makes candidate experience better. But was that something that you were able to do with your teams over the years?
I'm lucky. I had really great teams over
Yeah.
time. Like, you know, most of the people I worked with were phenomenal, and they loved recruiting because that's what I want them. And they were story people and they were connectors. And so, you know, and empathy, right? Like, that's the kindness, that's the KPI, like empathy, just understanding what people are going through when they're doing this, you know. And I think I was pretty lucky that way.
That's amazing. I know we're at time, but anything else you wanted to wrap up with, Erica? Or
I don't think so. This has been really helpful
insightful.
for me.
I mean, I would say recruiters aren't all bad. There are a lot
No.
of hard that we really want to find you jobs. We really want to place you more than you even know.
Yeah.
So please don't be too hard on us. A lot of times we're just so overwhelmed and the organization gets out of hand. So please know that we're good people.
All the candidates out there applying are good people. It's all human to human. We're all just trying to navigate it for sure. I cannot thank you enough for taking part in this, Valerie.
So much
thank
fun.
you.
I love these kind of conversations. Thank you for asking me.
It's awesome. This will get posted on YouTube. I pop it on and everything like that, so we can go back and rewatch it. We can pull out some pieces of insight and share those around. But yeah, wow, what a wealth of knowledge you are through the talent space and peeling back this curtain. It's amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in too.
Yeah. If connect with Valerie on LinkedIn.
I'm unemployed, but feel free to.
if you are
it's relationship building. That's it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
you know of a company that is looking for great talent leaders that can build great internal teams, that can instill good qualities and help your hiring managers get the best of the best people, then Valerie is someone you should be speaking to.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to hit the end stream button and cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Hey guys.